Welcome to the Revel Report. We're inspiring faith with reason and reason with faith. All right, let's talk about this beautiful scene and pay close attention to what the deer does here, because the deer coming in to the sound of the harp, it's not just a moment of peace and kind of these fairy tale vibes, but it's also a profound tableau of the harmony between man and nature. And it resonates so deeply with some of the most ancient sacred texts that we have that we're going to talk about. Oh, look how close that deer got before it jumped off into nature. You know, the world around us points to something far greater than we could ever imagine. And I wonder if in your life you've ever pondered, how does nature reveal God? Or can it reveal God in moments like this? From the smallest particle to the vastness of the universe, creation shouts the existence of its creator. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can spread the gospel together. You could be our number 10,000 subscriber. You know, the first thing I want to talk about here is the fine-tuning of the universe, that it points to an intelligent designer. The universe operates with such precision that even the slightest deviation in its fundamental constants would render life impossible. And this fine-tuning isn't just random, it's evidence of an intelligent designer. Imagine this person, this girl here, saw somehow spray painted on the ground, deer, D-E-E-R. She wouldn't think that a deer did it, or somehow the winds created this four-letter word. Well, in the same manner, we have coding and word all around us. Even in cosmology, the fine-tuning argument highlights how physical constants like the gravitational force, the speed of light, and the expansion rate of the universe are calibrated perfectly for life. If she saw there on the ground 10 plus 10 equals 20, she wouldn't think that it was just random chance. She would know that there was an intelligent designer behind it. And that's what we find in the fine-tuning of the universe. You find all of these equations that are perfectly fine-tuned so that we could have life. And if any of these values were even slightly different, the universe as we know it, it would collapse or fail even to form. It was John Lennox, a great mathematician, who said, the more we get to know about our universe, the more the hypothesis that there is a creator gains in credibility as the best explanation of why we are here. Romans 1:20 says, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. And this beautiful moment with this deer is a once-in-a-lifetime moment, and how this deer draws near to the sound of a harp. And we're going to be talking about that in a little bit, about a harp, about a special shepherd boy who also played the harp in the Bible. And this reminds me of that. But also Paul wrote about this in Romans to the early church, emphasizing that God's existence is evident through the created world. And really the context here is about accountability. No one can claim ignorance of God's existence when nature itself testifies of his power, beauty, and divinity. And if the stars and galaxies weren't enough to convince you, wait until you hear about the beauty of nature, like moments like this, how that reveals God's character. But let me know, is the fine tuning enough for you to see that there is a God, or is it not? And if it's not, how can we account for that? And if it does make you pause in awe, let us know in the comments down below. But if that isn't enough to convince you, the beauty and the complexity of nature reflects God's beauty and character. Have you ever stood in awe of a breathtaking sunset, or marveled at the intricate patterns on a butterfly's wings? The beauty and complexity and artistry of nature reveal not just God's existence, but also his artistry, his creativity, and attention to detail. Even in biology, the study of ecosystems and DNA showcases mind-blowing complexity. 3.2 billion base parts. That's like finding a 3.2 billion letter book and going, hey, that must have been by accident. Or a 3.2 billion coded software and say, oh, well, that was just, some random chance that happened. All these 3.2 billion base pairs, all intricately organized to sustain life, that if you would take one out, it would collapse in itself. Even Charles Darwin, often viewed as a champion for atheistic evolution, admitted in Origin of Species, the extreme complexity of the eye gives me pause. And this was before we could see microorganisms, and how there's machines in bacteria, and how there's coded messages in all living organisms called the DNA. You see, the beauty of creation is a reflection of the beauty of a creator. In the intricacies of life, we see the fingerprint of a God who cares deeply about every detail. You see, even this deer jumping off into the wilderness, into the forest, God foresaw. Psalms 19, 1-2 declares, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. And this psalm by King David reflects on how creation speaks to the glory of God. And this context reminds us that nature isn't silent. It's constantly declaring God's greatness, even to those who might not be listening. And so if the fine-tuning or the DNA isn't enough, I think what we'll talk about next may just convince you. Something about God's provision, like times like this, God's providence. So do you feel fine-tuning is enough to believe in God? Do you feel the beauty of creation, even the coded software in DNA, is enough to convince you that there is an intelligent creator out there? Is that enough for you to sense God's presence? Well, if it's not, let's talk about how nature teaches us about God's providence and his care. Nature not only reveals God's power and his fine-tuning and his incredible mathematics and his incredible artistry, but also about his love and provision for all living things. From the ecosystems that sustain life to the rhythms of the seasons, creation shows how deeply God cares for his creation. Consider the water cycle, for example. It's a perfect system that sustains life across Earth. Water evaporates, condenses, and falls as rain, nourishing the earth. This is a system that is a stunning example of God's provision written into the law of nature. The provision for life in the natural world is not only functional, but also stunningly elegant. It speaks to a mind that is not only intelligent, but benevolent. And think about the systems that we set up in machinery or in business or in organizations so that things would kind of repeat. You see this all over nature. Now, sustaining water is just one example of those, but the provision of that tells us that this intelligent mind is not only a designer, is not only an artist, but is also good. It is a provider. Matthew 6:26 says, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow, nor reap, nor store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they?" In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus used nature as an example of God's provision, encouraging his listeners to trust in God's care. The context is about anxiety, is about worry, is about, are we going to be able to survive? My question is, if God takes care of the birds, how much more will he take care of you? Isn't it comforting to know that the same God who provides for all creation cares deeply for you? Is that enough for you to see that there is a God, to trust in his provision the way nature trusts in his provision? You know, David, just like this lady here who plays the harp was not just any king. Before he was a ruler of Israel, he was a shepherd. He was a guardian of his flock, out there in the wilderness, out there in the forest, playing the harp. And I wonder if he played the harp and the animals recognizes that the harp, his music, it wasn't just for entertainment. It was a tool for peace, for solace, a means to soothe, because he would later also soothe the king with that harp when the king was bothered with these demonic forces, to connect possibly with the sheep and with God. And this is the same David that through his harp could drive away the darkness from King Saul's troubled mind, who killed a giant, who was a warrior and a musician. David was the shepherd king. Playing the harp was just a precursor to something even greater that God had planned for him. Jesus Christ in the New Testament is referred to as the chief shepherd. The shepherd isn't just someone who guides. He's the one who lays down his life for the sheep, who knows each one by name. And that harp, that instrument of peace and guidance, is like a metaphor for the word, for the comforting, guiding presence of Christ in our lives. Remember Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. This isn't just about provision, it's about deep, intimate relationship between the shepherd and the sheep. It's about leading us beside still waters, restoring our souls, walking with us through the valley of the shadow of death, where fear has no place because of the shepherd's rod and staff. And this image of this deer drawing closer to this harp is like us being drawn to the voice, the presence of the chief shepherd. It's an invitation to rest, to trust, to find peace in the midst of life's chaos. Just as David's harp brought calm and connection, Jesus, our good shepherd, offers us a life of abundance, of peace, where we can lay down in green pastures, even in the presence of our enemies. And so when you see this deer responding to the music, it's not just an animal being soothed. It's a reminder for you and me that we're called to listen, to follow the divine music in our lives, the guidance of our shepherd, Jesus. In this chaotic world, where it's so easy to lose our way, this is a call back to the path of righteousness, to the peace and the rest that only our chief and good shepherd can provide. And that, my friends, is something truly inspiring to live by. From the fine-tuning of the universe to the beauty of creation and God's provision, nature reveals the Creator in every detail. It points us to a God who is powerful, artistic, and deeply caring. But more than that, nature invites us to know this Creator personally. Jesus, the one whom all things were made, invites us to come to him. He not only reveals God's glory through creation, but also through his love and sacrifice for us. If this video encouraged you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can continue to spread the good news. Let's do it together. Welcome to the Revel Report. We're inspiring faith with reason and reasoning with faith.